Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
The big world of product management with so many dimensions, each one key to a desired outcome for users in the business. As our guest on this episode of the Software People Stories, Sunita Rao, Senior Director of Product Management at NetApp, says, you don't have any direct line of control and you have to build relationships across teams all the time to deliver as a product manager. She shares her experiences and insights on understanding customers, crafting problem statements, managing outcomes, and looking at new business models, along with several tips and catch-22s from her rich repository of learning. Sunita is passionate about paying it forward as well, and she shares her stories on volunteering her time for several causes. Sit back and listen to our new episode.
Hi, Sunita. Good evening. It's wonderful to have you on the Software People Stories. I've been really looking forward to this conversation.
Hey, Chitra, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate, the chance to talk about myself and really appreciate you inviting me for this talk. Looking forward to it.
So we usually start by asking our guests to introduce themselves. How would you like to do that for our listeners?
Sure. Just to introduce myself, I'm Sunita Rao, and I lead product management for consumption-based offerings here in Sunnyvale in California. And I work for a company called NetApp, which is a number one storage vendor of its time. And I am responsible for translating the company into new business models and enabling subscription for the company.
Thanks, Sunita. There's so many topics right there based on the introduction that you just made. So more questions on those coming up later in the conversation, I hope. So did you always want to be part of the tech industry? How did this whole journey begin for you? Where did you start in your career?
That's an interesting question, Chitra, and I know you will relate to this quite a lot. And from the times that we've been in the industry together, I think we come from a generation where we didn't have a choice other than choosing a tech or a medical field, right? And that's how I think all of us were groomed, all of us were taught to as children. And I come from Hyderabad. I was born and brought up, and I'm proud to say that I'm part of St. Anne's, which was supposed to be the school for some of the prominent, I must say, the Miss Indias of India that we've produced. And it's been an incredible experience being in school and deciding on the career path. My dad comes from an engineering background. My dad is a solar energy engineer. And for those times, especially back then, solar energy was unheard of. And I think I must have inherited something of that trait in me. I always wanted to do something very different. Engineering was a natural choice, obviously, but I think I didn't go through the regular engineering path. I picked up a bachelor's in mathematics. I was a university topper both in chemistry and in mathematics back then when I was doing my graduation. And then I picked up a master's in computers, where I was almost like the second batch from my university when master's in computer applications was introduced. It was a time when we were sharing computers and when we were sharing, times to just get the programming done to present our assignments to our professors. So it was an exciting time at that point. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got into the tech industry in the first place. And that journey started back then while in school and in college and later with my career as well.
That part of the journey sounds quite familiar. So after you finished your course, what did you first start with?
So when we started, this was back in the early 90s, and I think we did not have a concept of campus hiring, which was very predominant post my batches and post some of the my seniors have graduated after that. So when I graduated, I was looking for an alternative in terms of my career, and I started with this first startup, which was basically building applications for Nasdaq. This was a company that was working on building real-time applications that were enabling the Nasdaq share markets and how we can put the share price, how to bring up alerts and how to make things happen. I don't know how many people relate to this language. I was first developer in Visual C++ those days. Everybody knows C++ and C, which were predominantly there even today in this generation as well. But Visual C++ was interim that came in between and vanished after Java came into existence. So I think I was one of the first developers for that company, and I worked for quite a few years in that space, building event monitoring systems or event alerting systems, which basically told people who were bidding against a specific pricing on how much was that pricing elasticity was available for them, whether they should wait, they should bid, they should sell, buy, etc. So it was exciting at that time, and I was working on mainframes in those days, and that's how my journey into my professional world began. I think from then on, I have moved on to working with Ericsson, which was predominantly building a billing software for mobile applications. So that was my second foray into engineering in terms of working on the billing platforms. My experience with event monitoring systems, which helped me to gain this position, was the next one. And then later on translated into something like hardcore networking protocols, like the OSPF BJP. And I worked with all of the major telecom providers, I must say. I worked with Ericsson, I worked with Nokia, I worked with Motorola. So that completes the realm of all of the telecom providers back then in India, which were basically looking at some of these event management and billing systems and core routing protocols and then firewalls. So that was my journey into technology and my journey into engineering.
Wow, that is very interesting, Sunita. And based on whatever you said, I just realized that you've had a considerable amount of whole systems thinking, starting out as a developer, monitoring systems, billing and payment, protocols, and so much more. I'm sure a lot of that has shaped your understanding of, or helped with your understanding of really complex environments that operate today. So I knew you as a colleague, and I've often wondered what made you make the shift from engineering to product management, and what was that transition like for you?
Chitra, I think we shared a lot of common aspects when we worked together, especially in the engineering space. And I joined NetApp. We both had the journey together almost a few months apart. But I joined NetApp as an engineering manager for the storage protocol. So coming out of the networking space and the telecom space and then the storage space, it seemed like a natural transition to join NetApp as an engineering manager back then, and in managing those storage protocols that were relevant to the storage industry. Now, getting into that space, maybe 1 year or a year and a half later, I realized that I wanted to be more focused towards outbound customer management in terms of understanding. Yes, I'm already developing these technologies. I really wanted to understand how customers would use them and what is in it for them to actually leverage a technology against something else, right? In fact, it was interesting that at NetApp, after about a year and a half into the engineering role, the management thought of bringing product management to Bangalore. And I must say, I was one of the first few product managers who started out of Bangalore as the first product manager for file storage protocols, along with another counterpart colleague of mine who was looking at the other piece of the protocols as well. So we were like a 2% team for this, $1 billion storage company, and we were working remotely out of India when product management was literally unheard of. I'm talking about back in 2008, 2009 timeframe, almost about 12, 13 years ago. And I started my journey there. Transition was slightly, I won't say difficult, it was slightly tricky because on one end, you have to understand the customer space, which is a new area for you to explore. On the other end, you come with an engineering and a technical background where when you're dealing with your engineering counterparts, you need to be guarded to understand how much information is what you know versus how much information you need to let them know, right? Crossing the thin line and making sure that you really come in as a person who's a customer's advocate internally within the company and making that feature available was a very, very different shift. to where I started as an engineer. Because as an engineer, it's all about, okay, this is the technical capability and this is what you need to deliver. And you would deliver to your fullest of the ability. But here you're trying to actually translate a customer requirement into what does it mean from an engineering standpoint. Learning how to write user stories, learning how to write case studies, learning how to write scalability requirements, understanding the data center needs. These were all very, very, very new for me on the product management front. In addition to that, understanding how do you present to a customer, how do you present the value proposition, how do you present the business case, how do you present what's in it for me when the customer wants to buy your solution. I think those are extremely critical for being a successful product manager. I did have really great mentors in my career who helped me to get past that bubble and help me to understand more around what does it take to think differently and move out of your comfort zone. All through my career, I think the one most important aspect I think I would relate to is I never enjoyed the comfort zone. Always, within about 2 to 3 years of doing something, I was always restless to learn something new. I think the learn something new part is extremely important from a product management standpoint, especially to enable understanding of the customer's thought process and how you need to evolve with respect to changing your thought process from a feature implementation perspective.
Thanks, Sunita. I'm sure there's a lot of lessons there for aspiring product managers. You just shared some really, really insightful aspects of what the transition has meant to you. So, coming back to one point that you talked about, engaging with customers, and very often as working in engineering, we used to engineering language. And suddenly you have to shift to ensuring that customers understand what you have as a solution or offering, as well as understanding what their needs are, what their pains are. So, what would you say, or what would you like to share as a product manager who's now been at it for over a decade? What are some of those lessons and learnings about managing customer expectations and understanding what it is that they really need? How do you distinguish between a customer need and a want?
Yes, absolutely. So I think the most important aspect is exactly like you said, understanding the need between a want and a nice to have sort of a thing. Always customers think that anything that they put forward is something that we'll go run after it and build a solution. So to build a solution, the most important aspect is to understand the potential problem and the possibilities that we can build around that problem. So one thing is, when I am or my team talks to my customers, the most important aspect of it we try to build together is what is the problem that we are trying to solve. Unless until we come up with that framework, customer can ask you for moon and earth. It's not always like the most important thing to deliver everything that the customer is asking for, as long as you're actually relating that to a specific problem element of that ask. You cannot solve it. Now, that said, customer is the king. Customer is always your boss. End of the day, you need to know how to manage expectations and how to manage the customer expectations in a way that translates into a business. Product manager is an ambassador for a company where he's bringing the business to the company and making sure he sets the customer expectations to a level where you will have repeatable business from that customer. So based on that guideline, once you know what problems that you're trying to solve, you need to enable that ask. A simple example. So there has been a specific way of using our storage, and till I think the start of this decade, people never thought that 100 terabytes was a small limit, right? 100 terabytes was like, oh my God, it's 100 terabytes. That means that's the biggest size of the volume that we can think of, or biggest size of space that people can put data into. Now, come this decade, what happened is, with the explosion of data, with the explosion of the amount of information that you're putting on these storage systems, 100 terabytes felt like it's such a small space, and we need larger space to store data. We are talking about exabytes of data storage these days, which was never heard of back then when we started. Now, in order to do that, you need to think differently. This, of course, is a problem to the customer, but is it a problem to every customer? That's an evaluation that you need to do. Going back and taking the whiteboard and looking at what are those industries that are data rich, which are those industries that really need this kind of data inflow, that you need to build bigger systems, that you need to make them available for it. So based on it, we came back and we said, okay, these are the industries that really might need, which means like manufacturing, for example, semiconductor, for example, automotives, financials. These are the ones that are really rich with data, and they are the ones that really need bigger storage spaces for them to store data, right? So we need to put together a mindset to understand the problem and translating that problem into what do I need to do to build this, based on which you come up with a solution. And my approach has been, how can you be transparent and honest with your customers? Talk to them about the solution, understand what timelines you need to provide to them, be realistic, make sure you're following up regularly so that you understand how they feel about the solution, handhold them to a level where they're comfortable with what you're offering to them, and they become your evangelists. You don't need any marketing machine as long as you maintain these 3 or 4 bullets with your end customers so that you can exceed expectations as you move along, and make sure that your company is in the front and center in their thought process when they have to come back to you for a recurring business. So I think that's the golden rule, especially when you talk about managing expectations in a world that's changing dynamically year over year and decade over decade.
Sunita, there's a lot of information that you shared there. I think I'm, looking forward to someday when you would write a book about it, for sure. There's such a wealth of information that you've shared right now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I think this is where, most of the times product management especially play a very, very critical role, whether it's it's a legacy company that's doing things on a product that was built a couple of decades ago, or whether it's a company that's just started and evolving its newer technologies to adapt to the future. Most of the cases, the most important aspect of it is understand the problem statement, come back with the alternative, be transparent to share those alternatives with the customer so that you can jointly work towards a prioritized solution. End of the day, gain trust. So if you keep to these 4 important elements of the relationship management with your customer, I think that's a win-win. Now, internally, what you need to do with your engineering team is the same approach. It's a slightly different direction. You go state the problem, engineering comes back with a solution, understand what that solution means from a business standpoint, because engineering can be very creative. They can come up with n number of solutions. Not all solutions are business savvy. You as a product manager is the person who can actually build that bridge between creating that solution and making your customer happy. This is where you product managers play a very, very critical role in making sure internally they are keeping their engineering happy and they're keeping their customers happy. You become the bridge to both.
You just answered 2 of the questions that were lingering in my mind, but then I have a few more as well. So a lot of product managers, they look at how will the company be evaluated, how successful my product is, how do I, and you also talked about working with engineering, developing trust with customers so that you get repeat business. A lot of this translates into outcomes or OKRs or metric. And when you look at, setting of roadmap and creating releases, and like you said, technology is changing so fast, landscapes are changing so fast. I guess the first part of the question is, how do you define such outcomes? And then how do you keep monitoring or managing those outcomes so that you know you're headed on the right path and the business is headed in the right direction?
So I would take that question in 2 parts, Chitra. The first one is business as usual. So if you go back to my previous life when I was managing the regular storage business, it was basically a $5 billion business, right? And we had roughly around 20,000 plus customers. So end of the day, what it meant from a roadmap standpoint is, how are you prioritizing the asks that are coming from this 20,000 customers that are using your product? Number one. And the second part of it is, how would I expand my scope to go beyond this 20,000 and acquire new customers? So the entire roadmap priorities weighed on these two aspects of it. Last but not the least is improving what we already have in the product. It could be improving its usability, improving its scalability, or improving its availability. So these are the three vectors that I can think of from a roadmap perspective that I will look at for a business that's been sustaining in the industry for 2+ decades. That's a different challenge, right? And that challenge is more about, when I get a set of requirements, I would bucket under these three categories, and based on these three categories, I would then go back and look at what am I prioritizing under this, and how am I prioritizing, how much percentage I'm going to do for this 20,000 install base, and how much percentage for acquiring new customers, and how much percentage for the sustaining part in terms of improving the product availability, right? So this is a way that I would look at a business that's sustained for 2+ decades, and where am I headed? Think about a startup. Think about somebody who started something really new. Like you said, there are so many new technologies that are coming into the play. There is AI, there is ML, there is edge, there is core, there is things that are coming up with respect to cloud. So this is a completely new space. So within major enterprises as well, you can look at having small startups which are thinking about these aspects of adding add-on capabilities to products that companies are already selling. One simple example is the new acquisition that NetApp did, which is called Spot. And this is basically to optimize the hyperscaler usage. And how would we do it? A lot of people asked questions, oh, what does that got to do with NetApp, right? So NetApp is a major storage vendor, and we are kind of doing things both on-prem and in the cloud. What Spot did was to provide an add-on capability for the customers where it optimized their spend on how much of their hyperscaler capacity they're using versus how much they're on-prem that they're using. So this brings up a new metric for product managers where they need to think about adjacencies. They need to think about, okay, I have a core product. How would I expand this core product to offer different capabilities? Even within the storage also, what we've done is we've implemented analytics, which is an add-on, right? It's not a core capability of storage. What we did is we added analytics on top of it to enable customers to know where the data should sit. Should it sit on an expensive piece of storage? Can it go to cheap storage? How would I do it? So these adjacencies, thinking about these adjacencies is extremely critical. And that's part of the product management thought process as well. Now, beyond this, there is a third angle to the whole thing on markets are evolving. The customer thought process or the customer procurement models are changing. Now, with all of that, customers don't want to do the regular thing that they used to do previously. They don't want to spend cash. They don't want to buy anything upfront. As you know, as a service or a service-based offerings are becoming predominant in the industry. So what we had to think was, okay, I'm running this legacy business where I'm used to, selling in a capital expenditure structure. How do I translate that into something that the customers can pay as they use? And the reason for this is cloud. The important reason why these new business models are coming up is thanks to cloud, and the emergence of all of the workloads moving into the cloud created this momentum. So this is another third angle where we need to think about, okay, other than product, other than adjacencies, how would I define a completely new way of procuring things for my customer? That's where the whole subscription journey began. And that's where I had to build this entire new model for customers to consume through a way where it's not business as usual. They could protect their cash. They could enable an option where they'll buy only what they want or what they use, so that they're not spending more. And these times, especially given the current situation economically, majority of the companies are looking forward to this kind of a model. Hope this answers your question, where core product capabilities, adjacencies, and changing of business models are the key elements of the business on how it should graduate from starting grounds up to getting into something different.
Certainly, Sunita. I think your sharing this has really expanded the scope of many things that I had wanted to ask you, and very, very helpful and useful. I am hearing from several companies as well, this transition from managing successful legacy product and having a loyal customer base, and yet having to transition to new business models, or even think up new business models in the best interest of both customers and the business. I think huge challenges on the ground. So thank you so much for sharing it. I'm sure many of our listeners will benefit from this. Shifting tracks a bit here,
Mhm.
a lot of people are now aspiring to become product managers. And you spoke about the influence of mentors in your journey and how they have helped shape you as a product manager. And recently, I was reading this 2020 report on the state of product management. And one of the biggest asks from PMs is, I'm looking for opportunities. I'm looking for opportunities to, build my craft and cultivate, learn, and explore what it really means to be a product manager. And given the complexity and diversity of this function, now since mentoring has meant a lot to you, and I'm sure there are a lot of up and coming product managers that have worked with you, what is it that you have done for them in terms of creating those opportunities and helping them build and grow in their careers as product managers?
Absolutely, that's a very good question, and I had recently done a workshop with an organization that I'm an advisory on. This is called organization called ThriveWise. This is specifically for women who are looking for people who are looking for career transitions of moving from a specific function into another. I have myself been part of that journey where I have had, touchwood, I've had really good mentors who actually handpicked me whenever there was a opportunity for doing something different. So one important lesson or one important guideline I would talk to people is whatever role you are in and whatever you're doing, whether it's engineering, whether it's a sales, whether it's anything different, I would highly recommend enabling that vision of what a product manager does. I'm happy to support, I'm happy to provide the people that I work with right now, who I actually guide and provide mentorship to some of the early stage engineers who are interested in moving into product management. I would actually give them projects in, like, provide me this with sizing example of how many customers are going to adopt what you're trying to do. So beyond their technical skills, these product managers help in doing this analysis, because we come with that kind of a background where we understand how to model a problem into a solution, and that solution fit for specifically those customers or those set of people who actually want that solution is something that comes naturally. So one thing I think I would highly recommend is basically to understand the space much more widely and clearly than what they do in the day to day function they perform. I think it's very important for them to know how of that and what is the anticipated outcome. How will the customers actually adopt to those anticipated outcomes is something very, very, very critical. So as long as you have that mindset to build that capability within yourself, the discussion becomes a lot more easier, or rather your learning process becomes a lot more easier in getting you to that next level, or understanding to what you want to do as an individual. The second thing I would also recommend highly is to talk to your, I mean, whoever, whether it's your mentor or whether it is somebody that you know that will enable an option, is to shadow. Just to go back to what you said, I think when we did there was a company that did a survey, and within that survey, it came out that there are roughly about 21% of the employees, and this survey was done of 5 big companies which are at least 600K plus employees. So 21% of the employees are developers versus 2.7% are product people. So you can see the difference. You can see the difference on product versus the people who are in hardcore engineering. I would highly, highly recommend the engineering folks who are doing that activity to think more on the product side of it. The one thing that you need to change from your mindset is, how does this engineering view and product management view change? In an engineering view, your majority of time you spend is on your technical abilities. The rest is understanding the user centric approach. After that, I would say that maybe about 70% is technical abilities, maybe about 15% is your user centric approach. The rest is all about business mindset. How do you communicate the technology, or whether if you need to do any data specific modeling stuff that you need to do for your thing. This is your engineering view. This is how you think about it. But when you change your role into a product perspective, it completely shifts the direction. The technical abilities in this direction is only going to be 10%. But your major focus will be business mindset, user-centric mindset. Important aspect is communication. A new skill set that you need to learn is the strategic mindset. When I say strategic mindset, what does that mean? Is how would this problem help the company that you're working? Does this get any business? Does this get anything additional for the company? So this is how you need to change the thought process from an engineer to product manager. So this is where I would really recommend people who are thinking from a product management perspective, if they're really interested in that role, they need to know how to quantify a problem. They need to know how to prioritize, transform that problem into a solution that's consumable. Most important aspect, user experience. Another most important aspect, product managers don't have direct line of control. All of this works on relationship building. It's extremely important aspect of a product management function where you need to have relationships into different teams across that can help you to build that bond where they would know that you're the go-to person when they have the solution ready and when they want you to take it to the market. When we talk about the framework of the thought process for a person who wants to evolve into product management, we actually work on something called as a product network. It's a triangular function which relies on three pillars. One is the users, second is the business, third is the technology. So these are the three important pillars or three important convergence points within a product management framework. The number one point in this concept is a user. So from a user standpoint, we have to be really clear on the user requirements, understanding what the user is looking for, understanding or doing research in terms of knowing what are the aspects of that particular problem that you want to build on. Chitra, you asked me a question initially. You said, how do you manage the expectations? The management of expectations comes in this framework where your design is totally dependent on how do you manage the expectation. So once you're very clear on your user asks, the second element of it and the most important element of it is the business, because you need to have your finance, your technology partners, your project management, everybody to invest or put budget in there to make this available and make sure that this is something that's backed by the company in every which way to deliver the solution. I won't say last but not the least, I would say technology is very important end of the day, but technology is just an enabler. So the third element of it is the technology part of it. What is the technology that you're going to use to deliver this particular product or this particular capability that is important for your customer? Whether that technology is cost efficient and falls in your budget and keeps your customer happy. You see the relationship between all the three. So these are the three forces that come together, and you are in the center of all of these things. You as a product manager are in the center of all of these things in terms of balancing all of them together to make a final pitch which actually gets the right product for the right customer at the right price. If you keep these three things in mind, that's, I feel, is a success of what a product manager could be. And I wouldn't say that you have to play the role to learn this. You can play the role even while you're doing your engineering function. If you can wear multiple hats, if you can volunteer yourself and go ask for projects where you can prove your skills to get something that you can exemplify this capability, but eventually you can move into that function. I have done it myself. I have hired multiple people in my career who have actually projected or played this role, exemplified their skill sets, and I've provided that opportunity for them to come on board and lead this effort.
Thanks, Sunita. That again was such a wealth of information, and your experience as a product manager truly shines through whatever you have said. I'm sure this holds out a lot of pathways for people who would listen to this episode in terms of helping them understand more about the role and perhaps what it takes to be successful as a product manager, and very interesting for me to listen to as well.
To close it, I would just say a few nuggets. One, When you're talking to your customers, believe but listen. Important part. Always measure results. When you release something out there, make sure to measure how many customers have adopted, how many downloads, how many customers have used it, what is the feedback. Make sure to measure it. Always ship the right product. It has to at least match to the 90% of the expectations. You, as a product manager, are the advocate of the user. So don't forget that. There will always be disagreements. You need to know how to negotiate these disagreements and maintain progress. Finally, product is never finished. It's an ongoing journey. You need to know whether you want to take that ongoing journey to improve the product or whether it's time to kill it. Every product has a life. So you need to also know, as a product manager, whether you want to kill it or whether you want to keep it alive. If you're keeping it alive, how do you want to take this to the customers to make sure they understand the value proposition, even two decades from when the product was first originally built?
I think you've hit upon such crucial points, and especially the last one. I think that calls for a separate conversation by itself, and I hope sometime soon. I want to look at some other aspects of what keeps Sunita Rao ticking apart from what your daily job is. I know you have interest in several social causes. How did that come about? What are some of those that you are passionate about and involved with?
Thank you for asking that question, Chitra, because outside of work, what keeps me sane is some of these causes that I strongly, strongly believe in. I lost my mother to glioblastoma, which is a form of brain cancer. And that's a cause I heavily believe in, and I contribute to it. I'm part of the National Brain Tumor Association, where I contribute in whichever way, either through monetarily or through doing service. I actually talk to caregivers. In India, unfortunately, this is something that's very fairly, very, very new. When we were going through the situation with my mom, there were very few hospitals that were there was and what kind of treatments are possible. How do you train caregivers? So we actually have, me and my dad actually reach out to majority of these patients, talk to them, give them guidance in terms of how they need to cope up, how they need to be with the patients, how they need to educate them on an ongoing basis. And that's a cause I believe in. And there's a lot of progress here in the US. I take back some of these studies back to India, and I work with a couple of hospitals and couple of people back in Hyderabad, where me and my dad are on a mailing list where we talk to people when they come back and say, this is what happened, how do I react, how do I do it? So it's kind of an online suggestion or a online help desk that we provide guidance to people. That's one cause that I'm very strongly passionate about in terms of a social cause. The second one is something that my mom started. My mom was a doctorate in English literature, and she was very passionate about educating girl children. So there is an organization back in Hyderabad which basically houses destitute women and women who've been thrown out by their families. They could be burn victims, they could be acid burn victims, they could be any other situational ladies that this organization takes care of. And what my mother used to do was to coach them about life, was to coach them about how do you approach to interviews. I'm proud to say that we've helped women to participate in corporate interviews and providing them with that confidence on how to attend interviews. There were women who didn't even know how to speak English. So we have a trained package where we'll give them how do you address an interview, how to write your resume, what kind of things that you need to build on your resume to get a job. It could be any job, but we provide that support for these women and help them to talk to their interviewers. We also work with some of the corporates like Wipro and TCS, where we kind of work with the HR departments to see if they can help us in whichever way to help these women to be on their own and get an opportunity to build their life back again. So that's the second cause I very strongly believe in. Recently, I've been part of an organization here in the US called ThriveWise. I'm on the board to basically enable women for different fields. I lead the product management advisory on that board, where we help women in terms of understanding the product management function itself. I kind of mentor women who are looking for career transition at every which way, early stage, mid stage, late stage, where they want to move into product management career, provide them tips on how to build that option for them, run workshops to provide them with business modeling, thinking through about a certain business aspect in terms of changing their trajectory and thinking through, how do they get there. So these are my fun areas that I really love to work, and I enjoy myself in participating in these activities and providing my services whatever best I can.
Very inspiring and motivating, Sunita. Thanks a lot. This has certainly energized me just listening to you and working on so many dimensions, especially when it comes to helping women. This, again, is a space that I would love to certainly have a lot more conversations with you about. As we are coming to a close of this episode, are there any last messages that you would like to leave people with?
I want to talk about what I believed in always, and I think that's what I would advocate is there is nothing that you cannot do. I mean, one thing I always believed in my career was if you think differently, you can make anything happen. It is an ongoing process, a continued development, and iterating yourself on how you want to change yourself, how do you want to adapt yourself. Never sit back, never sit back. And the second thing is, every problem will have very different set of solutions, so there's no problem that doesn't have a solution. All it takes is to think through on what is the solution, and you will certainly come to that choice if you really think you want to do it. So never give up. That's all is my message.
Thanks, Sunita. It's been really nice having you as a guest on the Software People's Stories. I certainly look forward to many more conversations with you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you, Chitra, for this opportunity. And this is a really fantastic way to connect with so many people out there that I might not have met in my life. Thanks to you for providing this opportunity and helping me reach out to this wider audience.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Malavika for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.